Well, moving on to the second big conversation point that we have here, and that's the WhatsApp privacy debate, which is back in the forefront simply because WhatsApp itself seems to be leaving no stone unturned in an effort to try and reassure users about privacy concerns. So if you are one of those people who, like me, are still reading newspapers, which I hope you are, today most of the newspapers had one full page, front page ad here. And this was WhatsApp trying to address your privacy concerns. The header actually says WhatsApp respects and protects your privacy. So we decided, since we've had so many experts come on our shows and speak about what are the privacy concerns, whether there is a legitimate concern, and if there is, what should your solution be, whether it impacts you as a user who only uses WhatsApp for chats with your friends and family, or also uses it for business conversations, business transactions, speaking to your bank, all of that. So now let's take a look at what WhatsApp has to say and try and understand if that allays our fears, and if WhatsApp indeed has managed to do a good job of this campaign that they have started. Why is all of this happening? In case you've missed the alerts from WhatsApp and you've missed all the conversations we've had on the channel, or not missed reading it elsewhere, WhatsApp has been telling its users that they're updating their privacy policy. And there are certain changes that will be made about access to your data, especially for business messages. And some of this data will be shared with Facebook. WhatsApp and Facebook, they're all owned by the same company. I'm sure you already know that. So now WhatsApp says that WhatsApp or Facebook cannot see your messages. They are end-to-end encrypted, and they cannot see your private messages or hear your calls. Neither WhatsApp nor Facebook can actually do that. They also go on to then say that if you're sending a video or a photo, it stays between you and the person who is getting it. It's not as if WhatsApp gets access to that picture and then they share it with Facebook, which can then use it for other purposes. If that's your fear, WhatsApp claims that's not going to happen. They also say that we cannot see your shared location. Yes, you're sharing location. Under their privacy policy, it does say that sometimes this location is used for debugging purposes, but WhatsApp says they don't use it for any other reason or purpose. That WhatsApp groups remain private. There shouldn't be any fear about that. And whatever data is being shared with FB, well, we're not sharing any data for ad purposes. We don't share your contacts with Facebook. We don't share your chats with Facebook. The changes are only about messaging in a business format. What does that mean? And is this enough? If you're still considering shifting out, let's ask our experts. Tarun Vig, information security consultant and co-founder for Inifu Labs, joins us this evening. Nirmal John, editor for cybersecurity and emerging technologies at ED Prime. He's also authored a book on cyber security. Thanks so much for joining us. Srinidhi Srinivasan, principal associate at Ikigai Law, joins us this evening, and Aditya Chandru, journalist with Media Nama, is with us this evening. So good to have all of you here with us. Tarun, let me start with you. The clarification that's come in the last couple of days, does that really answer or address the concerns that many of the experts have been raising?
So, see, ultimately, at the end of the day, what WhatsApp is saying is they're only going to be monetizing business accounts, right? With the fact that they do want to roll out a WhatsApp banking feature very soon, and I think they have already got permission from RBI regarding the same. The next question to ask is, how will you categorize business account? Any person that you send money to, will that automatically be considered as a business account? This is one aspect which they haven't really clarified yet. Second, on face value, if we assume what they are saying is correct, on face value, they are only, they're basically taking data from the business accounts. But how do they distinguish, or how do they ensure that they will not be using the data of private accounts? Because once you break the encryption, it is broken for everyone, whether it's a business account or a private account. How do you ensure that you're using one while not using the other? Facebook, as such, is not very known for, their privacy concerns. So I think that's why a lot of people are shifting from WhatsApp to other platforms like Signals or Telegram.
Okay, let's address the part where WhatsApp says, so what has changed? We want to be clear that the policy update does not affect the privacy of your messages with friends or family in any way. Instead, this update includes changes related to messaging a business on WhatsApp, which is optional and provides further transparency about how we collect and use data. Nirmal, what does it mean? If I am communicating with a hotel where I've made a booking and they are now sending me confirmations and asking for my details and family's details and food preferences, or with an airline or with my bank about my bank account and certain transactions I want, does it come under this category? What are these business messages WhatsApp is referring to?
Right. Over the last few years, WhatsApp has tried to monetize. Facebook has tried to monetize WhatsApp. Now, their primary move has been to try and monetize the WhatsApp for business part of it. Right now, clearly that has not necessarily taken off, and the reality here is these transactions that these guys are talking about. There are multiple concerns here. One is on the very fact that this was always on the cards. When in 2014 WhatsApp got acquired by Facebook, the assurance given at that point in time was that there would not be any sort of dilution of user data and exchange of user data between WhatsApp and Facebook. Now, the company has gone away from that promise in various steps. And this was always on the cards, frankly. In 2017, Jan Koum and Brian Acton, both 2017 and 2018, within a year of each other, left with the message that Facebook has been walking away from that promise. And this is just the next step, frankly. The explanations that they've given for it currently, at the moment, frankly doesn't pass muster. It's frankly a failure from WhatsApp's point of view to communicate properly, and it seems they have messed up the follow-up to the communication as well.
Okay. In fact, let me actually ask this follow-up question back to Tarun before I go to our other two panelists, because Tarun, you said if we have to take WhatsApp at face value about what they're saying, why do you sound so skeptical about taking them at face value? Have there been instances in the past that many of our viewers may not know about?
So I think all the instances of Facebook, Facebook is facing an antitrust motion in both US and European Union, right? There have been debates going on about separating out Facebook and Instagram data, and a lot of people believe that this hurriedly announced policy for WhatsApp is actually a preemptive action, so that they can merge the data together before the results of the antitrust motion comes into effect. That's one assumption. Now, when we say taking things at face value, now if you look at how WhatsApp has changed since the time Facebook took it over, I mean, there have been multiple instances. I mean, if I talk about Facebook itself, Cambridge Analytica, perfect example, right? Facebook itself has not been known for monitoring, or it's not very famous for their privacy concerns on users' data. In fact, Facebook openly says that they are monetizing our data set. Initially, when they launched this policy, there was no clarification about business or personal accounts, right? Initially, when the policy was launched, it was very clear that WhatsApp data will be shared with Facebook. It's only when they saw people leaving WhatsApp in hordes, that is when they decided that they need to come up with a front page newspaper ad in most of the national newspapers, saying that we are only monitoring your business accounts. But again, as we say, they are anyways collecting your metadata. They are anyways collecting metadata of all the accounts, whether it is personal or business. They haven't clarified what's a business account. Tomorrow, when they release WhatsApp banking, literally any account would become a business account. The fact that I give money to you, transfer money to you via WhatsApp, does that mean that our accounts are business accounts? So they haven't clarified a lot of issues, and frankly, when the co-founder of your company, when the co-founder of WhatsApp himself left WhatsApp after the acquisition and he joined Signals, it doesn't really inspire a lot of confidence.
He's definitely having a good start to 2021 with the massive movement we're seeing of users from WhatsApp to Signal. In fact, Times Network even spoke to him, where he's emphasized on the fact that Signal is based on giving a lot more importance to privacy. Of course, there are still concerns there. They may be claiming that today, but do we know enough about them? Do we know enough about them to say a Signal or a Telegram may be safe? And if they are safe today, will they be safe tomorrow as well? Srinidhi, would you like to comment on this? Because at the end of the day, many people say that we don't have strong enough laws for privacy, and so it's up to any commercial entity to figure out ways to breach it.
Yes, I think one other interesting takeaway from this has been where a lot of people have been saying that in the European Union, this policy applies slightly differently, where Facebook products can't use WhatsApp data, and that's because they have stronger privacy protections in the EU. In fact, some regulators in some countries like France had also asked WhatsApp to stop sharing data with Facebook without separate user consent. India is still at a stage where we don't have a data protection law. We've had several versions of the law over the past few years. Right now, there's a parliamentary committee that's examining it and is likely to come up with recommendations soon. So it would be interesting to see how this might have played out if the law were already in place, because the current version of the proposed law calls for informed, specific, clear consent. So it would be interesting to see how something like this would play out in that kind of framework. Because what I think one sort of big takeaway from this exercise, from this incident, is also what happens when you clearly describe and the kind of data points that are being collected, and there is more transparency around the different platforms and what data they collect and how they use it, because that allows users to make informed choices about what kind of trade-offs they'd like to make and what kind of features they prefer and which platform they'd want to remain on. So I think, and were a law to be in place, then the law would also, I mean, all the onus wouldn't be on the user to make that choice. The law would also step in and set out some do's and don'ts for how companies can share and use data about users. So I think this really sort of flags the need for a data protection law that sets out some of these baseline principles for how businesses should handle data as well. And I think what it also does is kind of generates and inculcates a culture of privacy, not just amongst businesses, but also amongst users across the board.
Yeah, in fact, what you said about the need for a law, and we've for the longest time spoken about a privacy law in our country, but it hasn't seemed to have gone anywhere so far. We do know today the information came in that the parliamentary panel on information technology is now preparing to summon the Facebook officials in the wake of this entire controversy. But a lot of these summons have happened to a lot of the social media giants. It's not yielded in too much so far. Let's see what comes out of this one as well. Aditya, the other question people ask is, does it help if we shift to another platform? Does it? Are we, do we have enough evidence at our disposal at our disposal to decide if Signal or Telegram or any other app is better than WhatsApp?
So, I mean, it is important to understand that yes, there are better alternatives to WhatsApp. Mostly, I guess most people are most informed people are looking at Signal as that alternative. Signal is great. Signal has quite a few privacy is quite important on Signal as a platform, and that's great. But by just claiming that moving to Signal and Telegram will solve this issue does actually bypass bypass the difficult task of actually answering and tackling this issue. WhatsApp is. I mean, I've said this before that WhatsApp is not just any app. I mean, the the network that WhatsApp offers is I don't think there is any other app for Facebook, of course, that can actually counter that. And when you have such a large network, it is actually quite impossible for people. A lot of small businesses right now actually depend on WhatsApp, and they're not technically WhatsApp business accounts, but they're general normal messaging accounts. But they depend on WhatsApp to reach out to their customers and conduct business. For them, this is not really an option. For them, moving to Signal or Telegram is not really an option. So unless we figure out a way for making WhatsApp more privacy friendly, and that I guess that should come from the government, that direction. Unless we answer that, I don't think we're necessarily answering the question of better privacy, the need for better privacy.
Okay, so then I have two questions. One is, what many of our viewers have asked us in the last few days. Tarun, maybe you can respond to this. That if I'm only using WhatsApp to chat with my friends or family, and I don't have any work-related groups, I don't do any transactions, or use the payment, intend to use the payment portal, then is it okay? Then is it safe for me to continue here? It's too much of a hassle, really, to shift elsewhere.
So if we believe the claims of WhatsApp, yes, then it is perfectly fine for you to stay on WhatsApp platform. And I mean, it totally depends upon how private you want your data to be. See, actually, a lot of users are afraid of one single fact, right? WhatsApp, my WhatsApp collects a lot of information: my device ID, my advertisement ID, my phone number, and so on. Now, imagine merging all that data, just the phone numbers itself, with data available on Facebook. So you literally know who are the people I am chatting with most on WhatsApp, or I'm making WhatsApp calls to, because metadata they are anyways collecting, whether it's a private user or a business account, they're collecting metadata anyways. So they know who are the users I am chatting with most, or making WhatsApp calls to most. Merge it with the Facebook data. That itself is a huge amount of information.
So what is it that
It totally
that
depends upon
WhatsApp
you as an
currently has
individual.
access to?
How much you.
Sorry, go ahead, please.
So as of now, no, I'll respond to your question. As of now, they are collecting metadata in terms of who are the numbers talking most, sending messages to, or sending files, or making voice calls to. Apart from that, they get information on your device ID, your advertisement ID, which is linked to your Android platform, or in terms of Apple. They collect that information. The file, the backup of WhatsApp on the cloud is unencrypted. So, if they want, they can probably get access to almost everything. I'm not saying that they're doing it right now. As per their policy, they are not. But just the metadata itself is huge information on, what we do, the activities that we carry out.
Okay, and is there a way to ensure, Nirmal, then that we come up with a policy where we while allow entities to somehow figure out a commercial benefit of these platforms while we ensure our privacy?
See, if privacy is your priority, frankly, moving away from WhatsApp is just a start, right? You need to understand that there is they've created an ecosystem, frankly,
Yeah.
of WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook. Not to mention Google, right? With a whole bunch of products of their own. So if privacy is your priority, then the movement away from WhatsApp is just a drop in the ocean, frankly.
So yeah, essentially everybody who is actually moving today from WhatsApp to other platforms, Nirmal, will have to also shut down Facebook and figure out a new alternative to Instagram.
Pretty much. And that's primarily because the amount of data that is collected by Facebook and Instagram and Facebook Messenger, remember, that's the fourth app in the Facebook portfolio. Amount of data collected by these three is actually a lot more than the amount of data collected by WhatsApp at the moment. So the movement of Facebook is actually to integrate the backend of multiple products that they offer. So, frankly, if you're just staying with Facebook and not and deleting just WhatsApp, that's pointless.
So, is there a way then, or is that up to the government to come up with a set of rules? Can we follow the the policy that is there in Europe or other parts of the world?
Yes, a strong data protection law is needed, but there are things to learn from the way data protection laws have been implemented elsewhere as well. Informed consent is important, but in a country like India, how many of us understand these policies, the idea of privacy itself? How do we communicate informed consent? See, at the moment, one of the biggest problems that I feel is that the complexity of privacy policies, as well as difficult to understand and use privacy controls across technology platforms, need to be fixed. How do we ensure that privacy controls are simple enough for people to toggle around? of course, if you're using some of these platforms, these are businesses that are being run, and uh, there is a monetary element at the end of the day. But how do you ensure that you as a user has control? The government needs to step in here.
Yeah, and why is it, what's the biggest hitch there, Srinidhi? We've had a draft, law in the works for the longest time. Is it a lot of, resistance from the industry itself? Is it just lack of commitment from the political side? Why don't we have this law yet?
See, as the panelists mentioned earlier, it's still in the works, frankly,
Yeah.
right? It's a complex conversation, and there are, and there are, while the draft which is there at the moment will undergo a lot of change, how much of movement away from the original draft which we started discussing, it remains to be seen. From what I'm hearing, there is a significant move away from what it was. So it remains to be seen. Frankly, it's a complex discussion. There are multiple interests at play here.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to influence these discussions, frankly, and I guess it is taking time. Also because of the pandemic, I think some of the sittings of the parliamentary panel committee were pushed because of the pandemic.
Correct. Correct.
So
Absolutely.
I don't expect us to.
Srinidhi, would you like to weigh in on this as well, on the legal aspect?
Yes, absolutely. So I think, like Nirmal pointed out, I think this conversation has been happening for the past couple of years after Puttaswamy in the Supreme Court decision in 2017, where I believe the government had submitted an affidavit saying that we are in the process of coming up with a data protection law. And there was a proper process that was followed. There was a committee established, the Justice Sri Krishna Committee. They did a white paper and consultations around it. Then they came up with a version of the bill. Then there were further public consultations around it. And the government finally introduced a version of the bill in Parliament in last year, in December 2019, which was again referred to a committee which has been sort of holding stakeholder depositions over the past year. Because of COVID, I guess there were a few sittings that didn't really happen. And like Nirmal said, I think this is a fairly complex issue, which also does involve different parts of the community, the civil society, because there are also questions around government access to data, which have to be addressed. Government is also a huge collector and consumer of data, so that there's that aspect of the conversation as well. There's the industry, there are individuals themselves. So there's a range of stakeholders, and it makes sense for the law to also, when it's emerging, to take into account all of these stakeholder conversations, take on board learnings from across the world, Europe, the US, Japan, Singapore, different jurisdictions as well on how they've approached this. And perhaps that's where the conversation is. Like we hear now that the committee did speed up its process in the past few weeks, and we do expect some version or some movement pretty soon, probably this month. So let's see how this conversation shapes up on where the law is going.
But does it have, in its current format, does it have segments and clauses that addresses these kind of issues that we are looking at right now?
Like I said, I think one critical part which the bill does address is this concept of consent and the attempt to make consent meaningful and informed. But a lot will also depend on what happens then. A lot of the times the data protection law is a set of principles, and then the real meat of the implementation comes in through when there is a regulator set up, or when there are ancillary industries that emerge around it. Like we may have data auditors, we may have just like data advisors, a whole bunch of other folks who might become intermediaries in this process. Just as an example, something we were thinking about how consent could be made more meaningful, because a lot of users, even I mean, forget today, I mean, going far down the line, even if there is a law, it's unlikely that users will go through these detailed privacy policies. So how do we make those more consumable? Maybe somewhat of how a rating system for platforms, perhaps. You get this score sort of for platforms, and that's a more easily digestible information for an average layperson to consume than a long-winded privacy policy. So I guess a lot more conversation around how to make this meaningful, but at the same time, the law does and should also acknowledge that consent shouldn't be like the be all end all the onus of making these choices can't be on the user themselves. So also some element of demonstrating accountability, some which is just safeguards at different stages of data processing, and the ability for companies to be able to show how they've made those design choices as well in thinking about user privacy at different stages. That's also something that the current version of the law does talk about, but
Okay.
there is a whole lot which is yet to be discussed.
Okay, let me in fact bring in some of our viewers as well. We've opened up the phone lines in case anybody has queries. Srinivasan is on the phone line. He's calling us from Belagavi. Good evening, Srinivasan. How are you? And what's your comment or query?
Yeah, namaskar. Good evening. It's a long time.
Yes.
See, I have two pertinent questions. Anything cannot be absolute. Like your right to protest cannot be absolute. Your right to information cannot be absolute. See, there are things which are in national interest. Like if WhatsApp and other things are saying that nobody can intercept our phone calls or our messages, it is being misused in places like Jammu Kashmir and our enemy country. So before these people come into India, the government should say that yes, you should give access at least to our security agencies to intercept these places, because it is in national interest. And anything cannot be absolute. That is number one. And it is very easy. Otherwise, just block them. It is nothing. Heaven is not going to fall if somebody is not using WhatsApp. Now, that is one portion of it. Second portion of it is that, yes, India has a lot of software engineers, great people, and I think Indians can develop alternatives for all this. Thank you.
Okay. Alternatives, whether it's India made or overseas, as long as it keeps, respects my privacy, is fine. Srinivasan was also alluding to the entire debate we often have, and we've had them on Mirror Now as well, about whether the bigger demon is government accessing our data or Facebook accessing our data, and who probably will end up misusing it more, and where we have our bigger fears. But I'll keep that for another day. I also have Gulrez on the phone line calling us from Bhopal. Good evening. Go ahead, please.
Hi. My question is, will my online transactions be more vulnerable as a result of this? Because what I'm really afraid of, almost 50% of us have switched over to online transactions. You mean online transactions in general via other apps, or what you may end up doing via WhatsApp? Usually they have actually WhatsApp has also ended up like they're also coming up with the online transaction app or something. Correct. But apart from that, for example, if I'm using different various modes of payment like Paytm and others, right. So will it also make that vulnerable? Like, for example, will my my password can be exposed to the online web, and hackers might be able to access that. All right, so got your point. Thank you for calling, Gulrez. Tarun, would you want to respond to that?
No, the change in privacy policy will have no impact on any other application that you're using in your device. So it will have zero impact on that. Your device is still as secure or as vulnerable as it was earlier. The change in privacy does not change anything with respect to that.
Well, thank you for that. I hope that helps, Gulrez. As far as other platforms are concerned and what you're doing there, that's not, what WhatsApp is looking at, but what you use WhatsApp for, that's the point here. I'm just going to go back to, the clarification that has come. And what is it that we would need more from WhatsApp to allay some of the concerns that we've raised here? Aditya, WhatsApp says we can't see your private messages, we don't have access to the videos or the photos that you share, and we don't listen to your calls. But they aren't very clear on what it is that they're going to access. What is this messaging to a business mean? What kind of clarity would one seek from WhatsApp today to allay these concerns?
Okay, so the clarification actually does, in some disingenuous way, deal with the security of private messages, which was never under question because private messages are protected under end-to-end encryption. It's not your trust within Facebook or by extension WhatsApp that they're protected. It's just that it's technologically impossible for them to access it. And that's another, as one of the callers had actually called, that's another can of worms we can open later. So, so what we really need clarity, I guess we do have clarity. For instance, if anybody's read the privacy policy, the latest privacy policy, and one of the FAQs that WhatsApp has put forward recently is that they have basically given themselves a blank check that whatever information that they collect, which they've mentioned in their information we collect section of the privacy policy, that can now be shared with Facebook. Now that essentially puts a lot of stuff under in the picture, because that includes the information that you provide to WhatsApp, which includes your phone number, your status update, and your display profile, and so on. And that also includes the data that WhatsApp collects from you, which includes your IP address, which includes your ISP. And IP address actually also can give you a broad location data as well, as in where you're located, the city where you're logging in from. That also is now available to WhatsApp. That also includes your transaction details, as for instance, what right now is actually the most important part is that whatever you speak to WhatsApp business about, whatever WhatsApp business data now can actually be shared to third parties, which actually includes Facebook. So yeah, we do have clarity about what data can be collected. The thing here, the most concerning part here is that users do not have any consent. Now, as Srinidhi had earlier pointed out, users in the European Union have that option. And I don't know if consent will actually be informed. I don't know if that is the best way to do it, but I believe that is the best way that we know of, that we can think of right now. But if that option isn't available to Indian users, it speaks to you why. Because if they're doing that in the European Union, it's because of regulators that can actually force WhatsApp to do that. They're not doing that in India. That only means that nobody, like, there hasn't been political will for. So that is the main problem here, and I don't think WhatsApp can really allay any fears that way.
Well, what is it that they will end up doing that, what is it that we fear? Even if it's data about, messages to a business entity that gets shared with Facebook, what is it that they fear?
So I guess the most important fear here that a lot of people seem to have missed. I guess they've not been fully informed. General public, I guess, is that if your data is now like if you interact with WhatsApp businesses, you do actually in more than one way. You actually, it tells a lot about you, like, the kind of businesses that you interact with, the kind of things that you buy, what things you like and what things you don't like. And now this data essentially can be given to Facebook. Now what Facebook, the advantage for Facebook, and that's where the value for of WhatsApp is being derived from, is that Facebook has a better understanding of who you are, and now and it can actually even triangulate you better over its various products and services like Instagram and Messenger and so on. So that essentially gives Facebook a very good picture of who you are. It knows you in a very intimate way, and we don't really want any company, let alone Facebook, to have that kind of a picture of you, because we've seen one of the panelists had earlier mentioned how the Cambridge Analytica scandal, wherein personal data of a lot of Facebook users was misused by bad actors. And we don't really want that. And the thing here is, if users really are not comfortable with this situation where they have to give data to Facebook, they should be able to opt out, and that option no longer exists, at least in India. And that I guess is the biggest problem. So and also I also want to add that this privacy policy, the amount of outrage that it has generated, I guess it speaks to more about the level of distrust that has been building up on Facebook and WhatsApp, and this is finally that particular thing that broke the straw that broke the camel's back. So we are seeing this backlash that's been building up over years, and this is what it finally took for people to say, yeah, maybe we should look into this stuff.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. A lot of it is also not really understanding what is it which is at risk. If what has already been given to WhatsApp is changing? Is it something new? A lot of people are simply just saying, oh, because of, my peers are shifting to Signal or Telegram and they're saying it's safer, let me as well do that as well. And a lot of concerns and trust issues that have emerged in the recent past when it comes to Facebook, which is adding to this. Well, we'll wait and watch to see whether WhatsApp's attempt really helps in keeping back the users, or we see a massive shift. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining us in this conversation. Let's make one thing clear though. Not much is going to change for you as a WhatsApp user if your primary use for that app is simply to chat with your friends and your family, and there isn't much that you're trying to hide. That's on the lighter side. But yes, if you do interact on a commercial level and there are commercial transactions or interactions with business entities, that is where some of the data will be picked up by WhatsApp. A lot of those details have now been put up by the platform on their website as well, so you can go and check it out. Experts do say that when it comes to privacy and data collection, there are other platforms which do seem to be safer, which do seem to give a lot more importance to your privacy. But at the end of the day, that's a choice that you need to make if you're comfortable with this platform or the other, as long as you make your own informed decision. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation.